Hitting the button. We are now live with Juju Show, episode number 22, coming at you from our home offices. This is the Sprint rejects. Most of the Juju folks are out in New York sprinting on but all of us have reasons, such as doctor notes and things, to not go to New York and be part of the sprint. So we're going to stay here and rock out the Juju Show. With us, we have our regulars here. James, how you doing, man?
Hey, how's it going, guys? I'm doing well.
I like you got like the comfy couch thing laid out, like, just talking to your doc, Hey, what's up?
I know.
Kevin, what's up, man?
I'm super jealous of that couch. Here I am sitting here like a bum on a chair.
Yeah. But that's all right. We'll get him later. We'll do something and we'll mess up one of his little deployments or something and get James back.
Yeah.
All right, 2 weeks. What we've got to talk about. Honestly, there wasn't a ton in the news this week, but there's some good stuff. First up off the list is 2.2.4. Came out, I think, the day after we did the Juju Show last time. So I missed it by a day. And it's a small bug fix for model migrations, but if you are looking to migrate models, it's kind of important to have. So all of Jazz models are updated to 2.2.4. That can be. And if you're running your own stuff, make sure to go get your Juju upgraded Juju on and get to the latest and greatest so you can track that along. Next up.
Hey, wait a minute, Ricardo. I noticed that the development PPA, so first of all, I know I should be using snap install to get Juju on my box. Got that. But
don't be shutting down my SmackDown. I was preparing and lining up.
Well, now,
all right.
Look at here. There are some applications, such as Juju Box, the Docker thing, that pulls from the Juju Devel PPA, and that PPA doesn't have 2.2.4 in it yet. May I poke someone to either update that? My fear is that they're going to say, quit using it and snap install it, but,
Well, I mean, you'll probably get that in the short term. I do know, I happened to catch a conversation, I feel like an eavesdropper, like an IRC. I happened to see people in IRC talking about this earlier today. There's actually obviously people want to get the latest Jujus as well into the stable release for Ubuntu channels itself. And so I know that there's been some work. They were waiting on 2.2.4, which fixed an important bug to try to work on getting that in. So there is several different dev-related kind of chunks of work going on right now. There are folks on core that handle that. And so I would tell you to go bug them. And I can give you names afterwards. I don't, I'll post their phone numbers and addresses here on some paper. Just hold it up to the camera. Yeah. And we're going to tell you to go do the snap. Okay, I'll tell you what, I did the devs forever too, but then it's just so nice and easy to track the snap. It's been a lot of fun. We even had some folks that were tracking the edge snap that had their first kind of breakages, which is going to happen when you're tracking the bleeding edge stuff of what landed the night before. You can't snap install a Docker container, but you can into like C container, right? They fixed that part. Maybe is that still true? I guess would be my question.
Some hippies around here still use Macintoshes. And so Lexi container isn't exactly an option.
Oh, it's not an option. I see what you mean. All right. No, that's fair enough. Yeah, all right. Well, then we'll have to see. But
yeah,
for those of you that can, 2.2.4 is the greatest, latest, and you should have. And if you don't, you need to go ask somebody why. Why can't I have the good stuff? All right. Next topic? Ready?
Please.
All right. Cool. Next up, Ian had a thread to the Juju list where he was asking for, or just kind of giving folks a heads up. There's a push on core, so there's a lot of ways for folks who write charms to get network information. Network information can be just a tricky deal because you've got multiple network interfaces. They can have kind of their public side, their private side, and all that kind of stuff. So there's existing hooks to get things like to get addresses and stuff using unit get and I think relation get or whatnot. But the teams are working hard to kind of pull together a more network-centric view of the world with the tool network get. So that hook exists for charm writers to use. And with the advent of cross-funnel relations, it's been important for that stuff to get more intelligent and just smarter because the address you get out may be different depending on if you're asking for it in another model or another cloud and some other network than if you're local and asking for it here or whatnot. So Ian's been updating what comes out of that hook. Some of the stuff that's, there's some new new flags to use. So instead of, you can get, now you can network get an egress address and some other addresses. So if you do charming and you're interested in kind of keeping up with what's coming down the pipe in 2.3 and in just making stuff ready for cross-model relations and all that, I strongly encourage you to go check out his email to the list, get involved, reply and stuff if you have any questions or concerns. I'll have a link in the show notes, for each of these items. There's a link to the actual email or blog post or whatnot. I expect to see more of this coming. After I get done with this show, I'm going to work on trying to update a couple of charms that I've demoed with in the past to use the new network get stuff, which means then I'll have a blog post about how to update your charms to do the new right stuff. And hopefully I'll figure out how to do it in a backward compatible way so that your charms, don't have this kind of 2.3 dependency or anything. But that's all coming. So part of new releases is preparing for the new fancy bits. Cool. All right. Our promulgation requests. This one was kind of cool. It said it was already promulgated. I don't know when it happened, but I wasn't aware this existed with this prometheus-alertmanager. So you see me do a lot of demos or talk a lot about Prometheus because it's just a darn handy tool for gathering metric data and doing queries and filtering, and it hooks up to Grafana and all kinds of stuff. And when I do that, it's fun. It's almost like a Nagio setup. Well, this alert manager evidently helps it do things like trigger pager duty or send emails based on alerts that come out of the Prometheus gathered metrics. So not only can you use Telegraph to watch like host level information, but then you can also start to then send notifications about it. So that's a kind of cool thing to do. If you're into playing with Prometheus, you should definitely check it out. And it's promulgated. So sweet. And what am I getting? Check the question from Marco in the YouTube chat windows. We have a chat window. Where's our chat window? I have 7 viewers. I don't think I have group chat. You guys know where fancy chat windows are? Is it in the control room? No, that's for showing and hiding you guys.
I have no idea.
I don't either.
The YouTube chat for viewers is different than the chat for...
Yeah, for the participants. I've got that. What I figured that I would have a button. I hadn't thought about what we're missing the chat from the folks that are watching live. So I wonder where that's at. So great. This is a good old fashioned Rick figures out how to use YouTube session. The live control room doesn't help me anything. Let's see. All right. Well, while we get that question together, I will keep poking at stuff while we keep chitter chatting here. And here we go. Could I please get Marco Cheppy to join this group? Sophie. Okay, I found a live chat in the control thing, and unfortunately, Marco, I am going to believe and assume is at the Sprint in New York, and so I have no control over getting him here at the moment. Alrighty, we talked about Prometheus Alert Manager. Next one, this was a blog post went out today about how the folks that build and release the canonical distribution of Kubernetes. And what I liked about this, and I wanted to bring it up, is it's not just Kubernetes specific. I think anyone who has a complicated set of software that they're releasing the operations code in charms as a single solution in a bundle, along with software that is actually part of that, that is getting operated and deployed. This is going to be a really good thread about how they manage the charms and testing and the software updates and how they're using snaps for some of that. And so if you're interested at all, I mean, on the one hand, if you're interested in Kubernetes and CDK, go check it out. So some of the shows have some of that. You can participate, submit a patch, and what goes into testing that the patch works and stuff. But also, if you're just interested in how the layers of code and stuff work here across a large scale thing, I think that it's a really interesting blog post. And it does add part 1 today. And now I'm eager. I'm on part 2. I'm greedy. Where's my part 2, guys? Come on. It's been like 4 hours already. It's ridiculous. I'm impatient. So check that out. And then one other thing on the mailing list, I like these, the beginner question of the weeks. We talked about this last time, James and I did, about how sometimes you forget that, people don't realize that you can do something and you go, well, everyone knows that. It's so, it's simple. Everyone's already, of course everyone knows that. Well, they don't. You assume a lot. So what I liked was they asked, what determines the charm series? And the series is basically what version of a OS is running when the charm is deployed. So if I Juju deploy MySQL, what's actually going to come up as far as an operating system? Was it going to be Trusty or Xenial? Is it going to be, Windows has multiple series based on if it's their, Super Server Edition. I've seen the version numbers, but I can't remember their names. Is it the 2012 or 2014 or 2016 and all that? And so the short answer is that the series is determined by metadata in the metadata.yaml of a charm. And that you can test a charm on any series you like anytime by forcing it. You can specify the series at the command line and -- force, and it'll ignore what's in the metadata and go, just, do this, and I'm gonna, it may or may not work, who knows? They may try to install a deb package that doesn't exist for that version of the OS, right? But this was particularly kind of funny because it ran into old behavior. I mean, the way series works was changed in Juju 2. And before that, it was more complicated. You had to have directory structures that went into Launchpad paths, and things were pulled from Launchpad source code directly into the charm store and all that. And so the charm they were confused about because it was kind of published to a series, but then wasn't in the metadata at all. And we're like, huh? And that's one of those where you just go, oh, sorry, don't look at that. It's not the way the world lives anymore. We're, it's about a year old. And that happens sometimes. But there you go. If you ever wondered where charm series comes from, I've explained it, or you can look at the email thread there and the link in the show notes and kind of follow that up. But it's a good info to know. We like to think that you don't have to worry so much about the series, but from time to time, it can be important. All righty. Let's see. That's all I got. You guys have any other news? Let me jump into the main topic here. Speaking of beginnery stuff.
Jump.
Yeah. All right. Cool. I'm sure we'll have. I'm gonna have to bug some folks post sprint and see what went on there or whatever. So, all right. For the main topic this week, I wanted to take a step back. We've shown a lot of bleeding edge stuff and complicated stuff and multi-step, kind of things. And someone brought up that, sometimes it's good to just reach out and walk things through for the beginner. So what I'm doing is I'm going to do a blog post and I'm going to walk through the material on that kind of here. It's just an introduction to Juju. And I always find that whenever you look at a tool of some sort of technology, there's always a language to it. It has a vocabulary, the kind of words that mean something within the realm of that tool. I love to pick on the config management tools that we have for this, because you've got, chef cookbooks, you have, salt and, different, all the different salt words and things used for their things. You've got just the terminology gets to be very much, we're going to pick some kind of theme and then name everything through that theme. And we've got a little bit of that in Juju itself, Juju being kind of magic. And we'll get into talking about things like charms, which are, kind of our little packaged magic bits or whatever. So, and where it actually really bleeds over, I love, is in Conjure Up, where they have spells. I think they just gave up. We're not going to beat around the bush. We're going to flat out just call it magic spells. Awesome.
At least it's standard YAML, man.
At least it's standard, yeah. It's magical YAML.
Yeah, we don't.
So what I'm going to do.
HTML, luckily.
Yeah. I'm going to walk through basically Juju. So this is based off of, in the documentation at the end, there's kind of a glossary of terms. And let me double check what the actual title of the page is. Juju Concepts is the actual page. And it's all the way at the end of the table of contents under reference called glossary/concepts. And what it does is it goes through kind of the main big items to kind of know how to speak Juju. So I thought we'd go ahead and walk through it through an example. And so you have, let me start over on this one. Juju version. So the very first thing you have to do, and we talk about how to do it in case here of, you could do snaps or brew install. You have Juju the client. And the client is just the command line code that you have on your machine and you interact with. And you need to go get a client in order to use Juju, right? So when you hear people talk about Juju did something, oftentimes the first thing we ask about is like which part of Juju. One of those parts is the client here where you interact with, okay? And the first thing you do with any client, if you're going to go and use Juju, is you're going to bootstrap. And what bootstrap does, it brings up what's well, let me take a step back. So in order to bootstrap, you have to know about a cloud. Now, we've all joked about how cloud means so many things in today's tech world, but for us, cloud is very fundamental in that the cloud is some service available over an API that gives you hardware, right? Gives you access to machines that run, VMs that run. We don't care if they're virtual or if they're real world. We just care that it has an API that can turn on machines, install software, run commands, and shut down. And so in this case, I've bootstrapped to AWS, Amazon Web Services, which is a cloud. And Juju supports a ton of clouds. You can just run clouds, including some of your own. So GUI MAS is a MAS setup, which is a different product, which is really awesome because it puts a cloud API on top of a rack of servers that are in my basement and lets me treat it like it's a cloud, but it's, again, bare metal hardware down there. This includes LexD. LexD is all about putting a cloud API in front of creating and destroying and executing commands in containers on your Linux machine. So it's all about, something I can talk to provision, configure, and run commands. Cool. And when I do this, I'm going to give a name, and Juju Show 22 is a name, and that name is for a controller. So I can go to Juju controllers, and basically what I wanted to kind of walk through is these steps here about, you can see, so I'm using the clouds API to get an instance, and I'm going to wait for it to come up and then do some configuration. And this is basically Juju bringing itself up onto an instance in that cloud. And at that point in time, I now have controller. So Juju Show 22 is a controller. Now, what is a controller? So I like to just say that the controller is merely the API endpoint. It controls everything that your client talks to. Whenever you issue a command from the Juju client, so if I do Juju status, what I'm doing is I'm saying, Juju controller, Juju Show 22, I would like to issue an API call that says, tell me about status of stuff right now, right? The controller tracks what cloud you're on. It does all the calls to the cloud to say, give me another machine, give me another machine, to change the configuration of the machine, to tear things down. The controller is kind of the boss. And so, making sure my notes go through. So, and you can have more than one controller, right? The client can talk to controllers on different clouds or the same cloud. You can have many of them as you want, whatever helps you organize things in the way you want to organize things. And that's why I've got these two here. I've got Jazz, which is kind of a public hosted controller, and then this one that I've created right now. Now, in that controller, we're going to run Juju status. And Juju status right now is completely empty because what it's actually showing us is about a model. And so the next question is, what's a model? And well, for us, a model is just a namespace. The controller will namespace the machines it provisions, the configuration it stores, and all that by the name of the model, so that you can logically separate all the things you run and operate. So if you run a website for your marketing team, you can keep it mentally separated from the website you run for, the community team or the engineering team. And these names are all arbitrary, except that whenever you first bootstrap, Juju creates this default one because there's this neat trick. I look at the models that come on an empty controller. One of them is called controller, one of them is default. And so again, you can see how we're keeping things separate. If I run status, but I run status on my controller, notice it looks very similar, except there's this thing here that's unique. Status on my default model didn't show me this. This machine is the machine that the Juju controller itself is running on. It's about it. It'll tell you if things, there's a problem with it or whatnot. but it's completely logically separated. It's name spaced out from any other models so that you don't see them. You can control access to them with users and all that kind of stuff. So when we talk about model-driven development, we are very much talking about what a single model looks like. And then we'll get into kind of, why that's useful and important here in a minute. So we have these namespaces, we have these models. So of course that, that didn't do me any good. I have an empty model. So let's go ahead and deploy. I want to see a MySQL server running. So dirt simple, doesn't get much easier than this. Let's deploy MySQL. And then magical stuff happens. So you can see that there's these two lines of output and a new funny word, the charm. So this is saying that my command from the client to the controller said, please deploy MySQL. And it defaults to my currently active model. What it actually does is it goes and looks for what in the world MySQL means. And this is like DNS resolution. This is the short little name, but it actually resolves to a more complicated address. And this breaks down into kind of three parts here. There's CS:, which means that it was found in the charm store, and Juju operates a charm store that's public and accessible by everybody. This could have been local. If I had a charm on my machine, I could have deployed it instead, and this would not have said CS:. There's a name of the charm, what's it actually called, what's it doing, and then there's the revision. And so what I want to make sure folks are kind of aware of is charms are just scripts of software. It's a single zip file that comes down from the charm store, gets unpacked, and then it has little scripts that get executed. You can compare this to like in Puppet, where you have different manifest files can trigger scripts that run and do things. And so since it's revisioned, this is the number 57 revision of this charm. So first it locates it. What did I actually find? And then it goes through and says, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and deploy it. And if I now look at Juju status, it's a lot more interesting. One command triggered actually 3 different things going on here. It's like, whoa, what? So first, you have the application. Now, when I deploy MySQL, I'm only going to get one of them. You can see down here under machine, I'm getting one instance in AWS, and that's it. And it's currently coming up on AWS. It takes a few minutes. That one machine is associated with a unit. And a unit is basically, MySQL is a database server. I could have 3 of them running in HA and doing complicated things. And I would need to be able to refer to each unit in that HA cluster individually. So in our case, we would have MySQL 0, 1, and 2 if I had 3 units of it. And then there's the application itself. The application says, hey, I'm waiting on stuff to happen. It tells me about, I came from Juju Charms. That's where the charm store is, what revision of the charm is running. Because each unit kind of has global state across them, which is the application itself. So if you kind of think of it as a hierarchy, you've got, I would like to configure the idea of how MySQL works, where it's coming from and all that. I want it consistent across 3 different instances. And then those instances are actually located on hardware somewhere, be it virtual hardware or real hardware. So when I go through and get the config for MySQL, this is talking at the applet layer. Right, so this is the kind of configuration available for me to set and to do. But if I want to have another unit, I can add unit, say the application, I want you to add another unit. And it'll do that. And now I could choose, do I want to remove unit 0? Do I want to remove unit 1? I can reference these independently without changing the configuration of the application and all that kind of stuff that you're used to. So hopefully that kind of clarifies like where the charm is, where an application is kind of a running targetable instance once the charm is up and in the model and doing stuff. And the units are little instances more closely tied to a machine itself. So magic words, we got a few of them there. All that makes sense? All right. Am I getting nodding heads? Cool. All right, now let's make this a little bit more complicated. MySQL is nice, it's a database, but I need something that uses a database. I'm going to copy and paste it so I don't mistype it. So I have my own Python app, and it's called Gypsy Danger. I'm going to deploy it. So this is going to look different this time when I go through and deploy this. Come on, bandwidth work. There we go. It located it in the charm store. This time though, it knows, or I told it actually, that this charm is located in my namespace. It's R Harding's my username on JujuCharms.com. And then we have the name of it, and it's revision 5. It's the 5th. I've pushed it up 5 times. So now if I look, I've got 2 applications, Gypsy Danger, which is my Python app, and MySQL, which is my database. And my app would love to have a database. And this is where Juju gets really kind of cool. The next term we want to talk about, a bit of vocabulary, is we refer to as relations. And so my app's a Python app, and somewhere in its Python configuration file needs to be a database string to talk to MySQL. So I need something that looks like this, something that says MySQL with this username and this password at this IP address and this port with this database name. Because that's how my application can then read, write, create tables, and all the stuff it needs to do to a database. But nothing here, nothing I've done says, hey, MySQL, do me a favor, go look at your, your DNS entry here and grab that address and ship it over to this Gypsy Danger machine and tell it where you're at so that it can update its, any file or Python config file, whatever it is. So that's where relations come in. So I'm going to relate MySQL, and you can relate things multiple times in different ways. Maybe you have a monitoring way that you can configure monitoring. Maybe you've got an actual disk database. Maybe there's just a website that, like a URL to share. Different kinds of, I would call them different languages, different protocols here, where as long as you speak the same protocol, you speak the same language, then you guys can pass data back and forth between things, and we can model that. So I'm going to relate MySQL, the database language, to IP Gypsy Danger. When I do that, it goes, all right, it adds this relation here between these 2 applications, and they will start to pass data back and forth. So what actually happens is MySQL goes, all right, you want a database, let me go and create you a username, a random password, and a database, and I'm going to send it over to the Gypsy Danger unit. And then that unit can then get that data and go, oh, cool, I know what to do with this. My charm that I wrote for Gypsy Danger that controls how to operate my software writes out the ini file. Basically, there's a template, with a $sign, DB info goes here, and the script overwrites that with the real values from the MySQL unit here. So I don't have to figure out what the addresses are. I don't have to figure out what the username and passwords are. I don't have to run any commands or anything against MySQL to generate a database. The operational knowledge is all pre-packaged into the charm, and it's sitting there running and waiting for events. And this is kind of where Juju gets to be frickin' amazing, to quote someone. So those are relations, and you can relate things as long as the charms understand each other. Obviously, if my charm doesn't need, let's say my charm has no knowledge of how to talk Redis. So I don't know what a connection string for Redis looks like. I don't know what to do with it. So there's no such thing as like, Juju relate Gypsy Danger, Redis something to a Redis instance I deployed, because it doesn't know how to talk that. It can't. So the relations have to be kind of predefined and pre-set up in the charms, but as long as they speak. It's kind of cool. Let's see. Quick question. The bug list for the MySQL charm located. You tell you what. So, Kevin, can you pull up jujucharms.com/MySQL real fast so that I don't have to swap screen share, and we'll have you do a screen share for the web browser, and I'll do one for the command line terminal.
I would love to, Rick.
Awesome. All right. So I'm going to set Kevin up here to present to everyone real fast. So solution Juju in IRC. The question is, how do I file a bug for this charm? And if you look, charm owners can submit a link for a bug link and a homepage link. This is part of writing charms and putting them in the stores. You can fill in this metadata. And so for the MySQL charm, if you would like to file a bug, there is a link right there in the upper right for submit a bug. And that will take you to wherever the owner of that project maintains a bug tracker for them, right? So you can see there's a few there already, and you can click and file a new issue. So good question. Appreciate that. All righty, stop presenting. I am screen sharing still. Awesome. So next up, I have relations. This is good. And if I run status, basically status is showing me a picture of my model. And it's because it's giving me errors because Gypsy Danger also wants to relate to other things. So it's blocked and, other stuff happened. But okay, this was great. I have a model now. One of the reasons we in Juju land push so hard on making things generic and not need specific addresses or cloud specific details is because we want you to be able to have the same model, this software working together in this way, be very reusable. And so there's next term we have is called a bundle. And a bundle is just some YAML that describes that model. And let me again copy and paste. Let's see. Can Rick figure out how to copy and paste? That is the question. Oh, we'll paste poorly. And or no, it's that paste. There we go. That looks more familiar. All right. So if you look at what I did, I deployed MySQL, which was this charm at this revision. One of them. Well, actually, I had two of them. My bad. I deployed this Gypsy Danger application from this charm that I gave it. And there's one of them. And I related them. That's all I've done so far. And so what we have here now is a very clean description of this as a YAML file. And I can go, rickstuff.yaml. Let's write it out. And so from here, I can take that model and deploy it just like a charm anytime I want, right? So I can reuse it. I can bootstrap a new controller on a new cloud. I could create a new model, Juju add model demo 2, and then notice that it's empty. And now I can Juju deploy Rick's. I need a / Rick's stuff. Did I YAML it? What did I do? Hope I spelled it right. And it takes that very generic modeled idea of what's running, how is it configured, how many of them is it, how are things related and talking to each other, and makes it repeatable. Which, if you run websites for different people, this is a great way to repeat them over and over again. If you do testing, if you have failovers for in case the next AWS US East Region 1 disaster strikes, you want to have the same thing running in the West region or elsewhere. These bundles are kind of that description that you need to help make sure you can bring things up.
Rick.
Yes.
Stop showing my face.
I'm sorry. Why am I doing that?
I don't know, but I hate it.
Oh, I'm sorry. You got to say something, man. My terminal's all big and giant and overlaps my stuff.
You're going to watch the playback, and you're going to hear me say your name 47 times.
Am I? Oh, man. Well, so this is also Introduction to Juju, a.k.a. Rick Fails for 10 minutes. All righty. My screen is not in focus. Can you shout at Rick? Yeah, exactly. Everyone shouted at me. Everyone was shouting at me. All right. So my bad. Here, let's walk real quick. So I created a new model. I used my YAML file to deploy. Oh, here we are. Added a model. Status to show it's empty. Deployed my YAML. It went through and ran those same commands at one go that I ran over several commands. And here, let's finish up with another Juju status that shows voila, it coming up and looking very similar, except with different addresses, different instance IDs, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to stop there because there are definitely more terms and things to flesh out and talk about. But I think these are like the principles. If you can speak cloud, controller, model, charm, application, and bundle, and relation, there's 8 there, I think, then you've got a really good foundation for speaking Juju. or writing Juju or asking questions. And so what you'll see is when, like, oh, this isn't working, then we can kind of figure out, okay, what happened? What charm were you using? How many units were there? What cloud was it on? All these kind of questions you may get back, you can translate out. Are you guys having fun? Return to the basics. I mean, what do you guys think? Is that like kind of a good solid base of the words you need to know?
Yeah, totally. I'd like to see, like, maybe next week we could do a round 2 where we take that same model you just deployed and we say, okay, now I want to give these components attributes that they'd really have if I were to deploy them. Like,
totally.
I don't want my database to have a public IP, right? No. So maybe I think this is a really good, maybe an intro into where we could show, where this really leads to and what the reality is of, we have this great thing that's super easy to do, but then we can extend it to be exactly how we want it to be in the cloud too. So yeah, I think your demo is great, and I just think people need to know that it's not just everything gets public IPs. There's Juju has the concept of networking, and there's other things that we can do to make it a little more pliable, right?
Yep. I definitely think part 2 we'll get into actually having configuration of the charms, which can affect how the software runs and how it works together, the multiple units of it and all that. Get into constraints and actually leveraging constraints to say, I don't just want a default cloud instance. I want different sized ones with different attributes. It affects how, we don't have to describe it right now, but basically it affects how Juju requests things from the underlying cloud. And then you get into, more complicated things like you're talking about, like the constraints and such are actually part of, you can get into networking and how things are actually, what networks they're put on and how all that works. So I think there's definitely room for a round 2 where we kind of go up a level. So we'll give you guys level 1 homework, go play with it, make sure you fully understand it, and we'll come back with a level 2, and we'll have a quiz at the end of the show.
Yeah, that's awesome.
School's in session. Alrighty. Well, I have dragged on and droned on and showed Kevin's face more than enough for today. So I think we will end this week's show here. And until next time, see you around. And if you need anything, any questions or anything, feel free to drop a comment on the video. Ping me up on Twitter at mitechie, in IRC at #Juju, or hit up the Juju mailing list, which is all linked in the show notes below. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you jumping in.
See ya.